Hey guys, it's Bob here. So today's video is going to be weird for two things. Number one, I'm setting out on a personal quest to not do vocal tics as much. You've probably noticed, I've already had to fight the urge like 4 times, that in my videos, I often do a lot of and umming. So if you've ever had a public speaking course before, they criticize you quite harshly for vocal tics, for just dragging on with ums and uhs while your brain is trying to figure out which word to spit out next. So I'm on a quest to stop doing that. I'm probably still going to do it a few times, but if you're feeling hilarious, you could count how many times I do it and put it in the chat to make fun of me. That's always fun. Okay, so other reason that this is a weird video today. I am doing one that's specifically on advice for newer players. This is assuming... Yeah, see, there's one already. This is assuming you've played 2 or 3 games and you know the rules and you know a lot of the cards. So I'm not going to exhaustively go through all the cards for what you should and shouldn't look out for. I tried doing that earlier, actually, and something got messed up with the recording, so the screen was black for half of the time. So it was a little too depressing to try and go through all that again, so I'm not doing it anymore. Instead, what I think is more helpful anyway, because most of those cards will become apparent over a couple games, is going through... I have 4 ideas here, 4 concepts that aren't always obvious right away when you start playing that I think are very helpful to know. Number 1, and this is, I think, the most important one to learn by far, is that it's a race. It's not about whether you can. It's about how fast you can. So newer players are a lot of the time worried about whether the Fellowship will be able to get to step 5 here, whether they'll actually be able to dunk the ring. Because, after reading through the rules, it says that if this corruption marker ever gets up to 12, the game is over and you lose immediately, which obviously isn't the point. Like, you're trying to not lose. But that sounds a lot scarier than it is. Like the stats for the games played online, the vast majority of games are decided by either a Shadow Player military victory or a Free People's Ring victory. So the point being, sometimes it's worth taking the bit of damage to go faster. And that's not obvious to new players a lot of the time. For example, sometimes people are scared to reveal through Moria. Revealing in Moria can, result in multiple tile draws and can be really scary. But, you've been hit like once, and this is your second time getting hit. Like, say you've moved for the 5th time, and it's a revealing step, but you're scared of going through Moria because you don't want the extra reveal, so you got the high pass route. That's not an insane choice, but at the same time, you are putting yourself a whole step behind just to skip 1 tile draw. And you also might get hit on that step anyway. So it is often advisable to be willing to risk a bit more corruption for going faster, or you don't want to move a second time against 3 eyes because you'll probably get hit. Like, yes, you'll probably get hit, but next turn you might roll no movement. Like, you don't know when the gods of this game will give you more movement. So you really got to run with that Fellowship. And likewise with the Shadow Player, being efficient in moving your armies and trying to get to 10 points quickly, like, that is how you're usually going to win the game. Not with this guy up here, this guy down here. Like, I know they're both tiny little red things that can win you the game, but you like this one, you don't like that one. Just statistically, again, the vast majority of wins are either Shadow Player military victory or Free People's Ring victory. That being said, it's not like there's never a spot to care about corruption. But just that, in terms of priority, speed is usually more important than corruption. So yeah, that's point number 1, that it's a race. Point number 2 I have are that dice aren't all important. And what I mean by that is that the significance of having Gandalf the White in the game for a 5th die, or the significance of crowning Aragorn and getting a 6th die, is often overrated by newer players, because this was me a lot when I first started playing the game. I was like, I could have a 6th die every turn forever? That's amazing. That's game-changing. And to be fair, yes, it is important. But the thing to appreciate is that the game doesn't last forever. Sometimes games are done as early as turn 7 or 8. The average is more like turn 9 or 10. So if it's only turn 4 or 5 and you're crowning Aragorn, you're only going to get, like 3 to 5 dice out of him. So looking at it like that puts it into perspective. And of course, keeping Strider in the Fellowship has a lot of value too, because he allows you to hide and move faster. It is often seen at the At the higher elo, most players usually plan on keeping Strider in the Fellowship and just running, unless the cards give them a good reason to separate Strider. Like if you have Challenge of the King and Dead Men in hand and you can crown Aragorn right now, then they'll consider it. But yeah. That being said, there's another one. Don't just take my word for it. You really got to play these things out for yourself. Like, a lot of newer players are also like, what if you just start going for a Free People's military win from turn 1? Or what if you just put in 3 eyes every turn? There are reasons for why why neither of those ideas are played as much. But at the same time, you don't really learn just from some random guy online saying, well, if you put in 3 eyes every turn, they're just going to move slowly. You really got to just play it and figure it out for yourself and see what other people do. That's how you learn. You get better at the game, is you just play and figure it out for yourself, So, yeah. The other side, too, dice aren't all important. Like, obviously, as the Shadow player, you want to get Saruman in the game. Usually turn 1 is preferable. And another mistake is that newer players will be excited to get Helm's Deep because it's right there, but scared of losing Saruman at the same time. So many people will leave this army here all game and then still at the end of the game leave some units behind to protect Saruman because you're scared of losing the die. Now, that's not necessarily wrong, but at the same time, those extra units might make the difference between winning Helm's Deep. And if those are the last 2 points you need, then it's pretty okay to lose Saruman. That's my typical way of playing it anyway, is that I'll just leave that army there to protect him against Ents all game. And then if I need this army, use it right at the end to get Helm's Deep and let Saruman die. So as a Shadow player, you can hinder yourself and slow yourself down by being too scared to lose a die. Similarly, a newer player might specifically send a Hobbit to, like say the Witch King's in play. He's gone stomping along and he's besieged Minas Tirith. And the Free People's player happens to have a Hobbit there. You might know that there's the card out there, Blade of Westerness, where the Hobbit has a shot at killing the Witch King. At the same time, as a Shadow player, I'm not that scared of that, because even if you kill the Witch King, that's Mithril Coat and Sting gone. Like, that's a huge asset for the Free Peoples. Like, I still might try to avoid it, but at the same time, I wouldn't completely derail my plans as Shadow for winning on military just because there's a slight chance they might play that card and kill the Witch King. So, all that to say, dice aren't the most important. Similarly, the Free People's player shouldn't always be scared of throwing Gandalf under the bus, like with a card of why here we prove the Swifter to try to hold on to this stronghold. If it's close to the end of the game and that makes the difference, you absolutely should be willing to risk losing a die for it. So anyway, that's point number 2. Point number 3 is asking the question, what can my opponent do this turn? Or what might my opponent do this turn? A very easy mistake to make when you're newer in the game. Say this army was besieging Lorien, and you conquered Lorien. Great. Good job, Witch King. And then you leave the stronghold, and you think, well, you look at Rohan. We'll say Rohan's buffed up a little bit. Say they played Éomer. And say this army's a little bit weaker. And you're thinking, I should really bring all these units because I want to have all the strength I can to take on this stronghold. Now, that's a reasonable thought, but the problem is you need to ask yourself what your opponent might be able to do. So if you go stomping in here and put Helm's Deep under siege and Rohan gets all the way down to war, then guess what? They might be able to, muster up a regular there, and if they have a few H's, they might be able to go and retake Lorien. So obviously that's a lot to process for just one turn, but it's asking the question, what can my opponent do this turn? This often means, leaving a regular behind in a stronghold, especially around the dew line. I got punished for this as a newer player, and I've seen other newer players get punished for this, where after conquering Woodland Realm, they'll leave it empty, and then a unit man just to sneak into it again later, and then you have to reconquer it. So especially when the Free Peoples has H dice, you got to think about what they might do with it. Or as the shadow player, you can also notice. I don't like that roll. Give me a different one. That's better. Okay. You can notice if the Free Peoples has no musters, you can also ask yourself, like, what is there to do about that this turn? A couple handy spots to keep an eye on anyway are Dol Amroth, for instance. Like, this army will often end up sitting in Umbar and waiting for Corsairs to show up. Or if it doesn't, then they'll run by themselves. And if you happen upon a turn like this anyway, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, I should have one more down there for Saruman anyway. No, give me those dice back. I want to roll this again. Give me a better roll. Man, I wish I could do that in the game, huh? Just ask for a better roll. So this has enough attacks to get you Dol Amroth now. And if the Free Peoples rolls that and they have no musters, you can ask yourself, what can I do right now since they have no musters? And one answer could be you could pivot the Nazgul down here and just run at Dol Amroth. Again, supposing you had enough attacks for that. Like, this is a real thing that I've gotten to take advantage of and have been punished by in the past anyway. Where, because the Free Peoples doesn't have any musters, or say, like, you had a muster, but you already used it on something else this turn. Now, it doesn't matter that I'm going to put Gondor at war when I attack Pelargir. I'm still going to get Dol Amroth under siege without you being able to muster it at all. Because, yeah, you don't have any musters this turn. So, another spot where this can come up is in Rohan here. Setting it back up to the original state. It's pretty typical for the Free Peoples to move like that. They might move them straight to Helm's Deep, but oftentimes people move it to Fords of Isen. If the Free Peoples also has no H's, no hybrids or Wills of the West, sometimes you can catch this army out and you can sneak around with a different army and get Helm's Deep. So that's another question to ask, like, if they can't protect themselves in a certain way, this is a great time to go and punish that. Also asking, what might my opponent be able to do? Say Lorien is, there. And the Free Peoples, this kind of segues itself neatly into point number 4. Say they've already played Celeborn's Galadrim and you were coming this way. So that's a bummer that they played Celeborn. But guess what you don't need to do after you've got this army at siege, or if the elves aren't at war yet. You don't need to rush down this stronghold right now, because Celeborn has already happened. Like, this stronghold is not going to get any stronger. Like, maybe Power 2 Great will show up, so that's not as good of an example. But say you've got Woodland Realm under siege here, and they've already played Thranduil. There is no need to rush this stronghold right now, because it's not going to get any stronger. If Thranduil hadn't been played yet, yes, by all means, rush that stronghold down so you can move on. But if you have another army that's in the middle of doing something, like, you don't need to rush to get Woodland Realm, like, why not rush and go get Dol Amroth right now? Because there is very much a chance that could get stronger. There's Círdan's ships out there. There's Imrahil out there. He might still be able to muster it by hand. So kind of just asking that question of, what is my opponent able to do in response to what I'm doing? Similarly, as the Free Peoples, if you have an extra H, it feels bad just retreating this army to Helm's Deep, but, like, the number of times where I've made someone spend a ring walking this army back, or a character die when they really needed to move the Fellowship, it's non-trivial anyway. So it feels nicer to wait for Éomer and see if you can leave a regular behind. But yeah, it's kind of just looking to protect yourself in future turns in case you don't have the appropriate dice and they do have a chance of punishing you too. There's another one. What else is there? You can also look at the shadow player, what they might be able to not do. Like, if they don't have a lot of attacks and the dwarves, okay, a good example here is that the North are active. Say this guy was in the way, but he got killed, so they're a step down. And then the shadow player rolls no attacks this turn, and you have a bunch of musters. It might be worth looking into to muster the North down a couple times so that you could muster an elite in there. Or if you had Fear Fire foes in hand, then it's worth looking into, because you know that the shadow player can't just step on Dale right now anyway. I know that's a fairly unlikely situation, but just asking the question, like, what can my opponent do or not do right now, and how should I play in response to that? Last point I have is don't disclose info before you have to, for point number 4. So like I was saying, like because the free people's... Never mind, I guess that doesn't quite tie in with the point I was saying before. So right now the Shadow player might be thinking, like, yes, Woodland Realm is already at max strength, but I want to finish it quickly so I can move on to Erebor before Dane Ironfoot shows up. And you have Dane Ironfoot in hand. You should avoid playing it until after they put Erebor to siege, in general. Because if I play Dane now, then they know they don't have to rush on Woodland Realm because they know they don't have to rush for Erebor because it's already as strong as it's going to get. And it also gives them a heads up about how strong you're going to be. If, you know, you just walk this guy over like usual, I'm still as a Shadow player thinking like, ooh, that is a lot weaker than it would be if Dane showed up. So I want to rush and get this army up there real quick so that it can join up with this and take Erebor. But if you play Dane first, before I do all that moving, then I'm going to be a little more relaxed about how fast I go, and I'll wait and probably muster up more because I know part A, it's not getting any stronger. Part B, because it is that strong, I know I need reinforcements. Whereas if you play it first, then I know, oh crap, Dane's there. I should wait for many kings, or I should wait for Horde from the east, or I should just muster a few more Oliphants in. Whereas if you let me do that first, now my army might not be strong enough, and then I'd have to reinforce and come back again, and that wastes a lot of my time. So it's a tough call with things like Thranduil or Celeborn because, like, say this Shadow army's over here, and you have Celeborn in your hand and you haven't played it yet. At the same time, getting to play it allows you to cycle cards. Like, especially if you have Gandalf the Grey as the guide still, and you have Palantirs and you want to play them, it might be the right call. It might not. It's a little hard to tell sometimes, you know. But just keeping that concept in mind that if you can avoid revealing info, it's better to do it that way. This also comes down to which actions you play first. So let's say, okay, say this is your role. You're obviously going to move the Fellowship, and you might want to do that first before there's a Nazgul on you. But let's say that there's a Nazgul on you, and there's no strongholds that you need to quick muster up before the Shadow player attacks. Like, why not pass? Why not wait and let your opponent do something first? Before you drop any bombs about where you're going to move armies or where you're going to muster up. And if you have a move you're obviously going to do anyway, it's better to lead with that one. So say I'm going to, do something crazy. It's better to just move the Fellowship first because he knows I'm obviously going to move the Fellowship sooner or later anyway. Okay, so there are my 4 main points for you today. That it's a race. Dice aren't all important. Always ask the question, what can my opponent do this turn, or what might he do this turn? And don't disclose information before you have to. Hope that's helpful. If you disagree or think there's other really good advice for newer players, feel free to add that in the comments. And yeah, thanks for watching. Have a good one.